On Father's Day, my daughter Marissa handed me a pair of socks worth about $12, her smile radiant as if she were giving me something precious. That same afternoon, I caught sight of a luxury watch worth nearly $9,000 on her father-in-law's wrist, something she'd insisted was a necessary expense, all bought with my money. Not long after, she called me 14 times, her voice tight with panic. "Dad, please, don't do this." But by then, I had already stepped into a place where regret had no home. Sunlight streamed through the living room windows, casting golden lines across the threadbare couch where I waited. Marissa had promised a surprise for Father's Day. Despite the quiet letdowns over the years, a sliver of hope stirred in me, fragile, but still there. The old wall clock ticked on, each second echoing the time I'd poured into her life. 2 decades since her mother passed. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, all carved into my bones. The room carried the faint scent of lemon polish, a habit I'd never shaken from my late wife, Celeste. The shelves were lined with photos, our anchors in time. Marissa as a child with a lopsided grin, me by her side at her graduation. We had always been a team. At least, I thought we were. The doorbell rang. My heart gave a hopeful jolt. I opened the door to find her standing there, her auburn hair slicked into a neat bun, a coat far too expensive for our modest neighborhood outside Riverton, a small town with big city dreams. In her hand was a gift bag, the tissue paper crumpled like it had been thrown in the last minute. Behind her stood her husband, Grant, lounging like he owned the world, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Happy Father's Day, Dad," Marissa said sweetly. But there was something sharp beneath her words, like velvet hiding a blade. She thrust the bag into my hands with a smile as tight as a camera pose she didn't want to take. I returned her smile, hollow as it was, and took the bag. It was light, insignificant. I settled back onto the couch, their eyes tracking me. Marissa's expectant. Grant's amused in that lazy way that made my skin itch. The clock ticked louder, or maybe that was just my pulse. I reached in and pulled out a pair of navy socks. Basic. Discount bin quality. The kind that cost maybe $12, if that. The tag still dangled from one, swaying like a silent insult. My chest tightened, but I kept my face blank. "Socks," I said, holding them up. "Practical. Always dreamed of these." Marissa let out a brittle laugh. "Exactly. Something useful, right? It's not like you need anything fancy." Her nails, perfectly manicured, sparkled as she adjusted her silk scarf, an elegant gesture meant to look casual. It didn't. Grant chuckled, leaning against the doorframe. "Yeah, Warren, you're a no-frills kind of guy. Nothing extravagant needed." His voice dripped with something that wasn't quite mockery, but it wasn't far off either. The room felt smaller, the air thicker with each passing second. I nodded slowly, folding the socks as if they mattered. "Appreciate it. Both of you." My voice was even, but my hands were trembling. I glanced over at the photo of Celeste, her gentle eyes frozen in a smile that now seemed like a memory from another life. Had I let her down? Had I raised a daughter who saw me more as a burden than a blessing? I pushed the thought aside. "You staying for coffee?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We've got plans," Marissa said, glancing at her phone. "Dinner with Grant's dad, Martin. You know how he's always hosting things." She and Grant exchanged a quick glance. There was something in it. Not quite guilt. Maybe satisfaction. They left minutes later, the silence they left behind deeper than before. The clock ticked on, each beat like a drum in my skull. I carried the socks to the kitchen, needing to move, to do something. The gift bag caught on the edge of the counter, tearing slightly. The sound reminded me of splintering wood, fragile promises snapping under pressure. I set the socks down and reached for a mug, my hands still shaky. Then the memory surfaced. Marissa's college tuition, $36,000 a year. All of it paid by selling the boat I'd spent a lifetime dreaming about. A retirement on the water, traded for her future. I told myself it was worth it. That she'd carry our family's love forward, that she'd remember. The mug slipped through my fingers and shattered on the tiled floor. I stared at the shards. Sharp. Irreparable. My breathing grew uneven. Had it all been for nothing? I grabbed the broom and swept the pieces, each motion scraping at the ache in my chest. Her words echoed again. Something useful, right? And I wondered, when had she stopped seeing me as her father and started seeing me as just a resource? The coffee was brewing, the scent strong and grounding. I sat at the table, the socks still sitting on the counter like a joke I wasn't in on. My laptop was open, an old habit from years of keeping up with work, but instead of emails, I clicked through social media, hoping to distract myself. And that's when I saw it. A photo posted just 40 minutes earlier by Marissa. Grant's father, Martin, grinning at a restaurant, a Rolex gleaming on his wrist, the kind of watch that whispers wealth without saying a word. Her caption read, "To the best father-in-law, a gift that matches your class." My blood ran cold. I tapped the photo, enlarging it. The timepiece shimmered beneath the restaurant lighting, unmistakable in its luxury. I remembered the call 8 weeks ago, Marissa's voice trembling. "Dad, I need $9,000. It's urgent. Medical stuff." I'd wired the money that same day. No questions. No hesitation. Now my hands trembled as I stared at the glowing screen. The socks lay forgotten on the counter, the room echoing with the relentless tick of the living room clock. And then, something inside me shifted. Not with a bang, but with a soft, final click of a lock falling into place. That afternoon, Marissa called me 14 more times, her voice strained and panicked. "Dad, please, don't do this." But she didn't realize I had already crossed a line, one that didn't lead back. The kitchen had grown dim, clouds swallowing the sun as shadows crept across the floor. The broken shards of the mug were long since dumped in the trash, but the bitterness lingered stronger even than the cold coffee sitting beside me. The laptop still glowed, the image of Martin's Rolex gleaming like a brand on my memory. I zoomed in again, desperate for some kind of mistake, some clue that would unravel the sinking truth. But there it was, unmistakable. Her caption still burned into my retinas, "A gift that matches your class." My fingers hovered over the keys, trembling not with fear, but with a fury I hadn't felt in years. $9,000. My money, disguised as a medical emergency, now shining from another man's wrist while I held onto socks from the bargain rack. The snap of the laptop closing broke the silence. It echoed louder than it should have, slicing through the room like a verdict. Tick, tick. Every second from that clock felt like a slap. A reminder of the years I'd poured into her. Every overnight shift. Every mischance. Every dream I shelved so she could chase hers. I stood suddenly, the chair legs screeching against tile, and grabbed my coat. I needed out. Air. Space. Something to drown the noise raging inside. The socks stayed behind on the counter, their cheap price tag dangling like a dare. Outside, Brookfield looked almost too perfect. Trimmed lawns, blooming azaleas, a neighborhood dressed in civility, hiding the rot beneath. The sky was iron gray, promising rain. The air carried the scent of cut grass and something sour resentment, maybe. I walked fast, like I could leave the betrayal behind with each step. Toward the park, where things used to make sense. My phone buzzed. Again. Marissa. Her 14th call that day. I didn't answer. The vibration against my leg was just another echo of my pulse. "Dad, please. Don't do this," she'd begged earlier. What did she expect? That I'd laugh it off? Pretend I hadn't seen the watch, the caption, the lie? The park was nearly empty. The swings swayed gently in the breeze, haunted by old laughter. I stopped near the bench, our bench, where I used to sit while Marissa played. Her giggles had once filled this air, echoing with promise. I closed my eyes, and there she was 6 years old, pigtails bouncing, swearing she'd always be my little girl. I'd believed her, believed in us. Now, that promise felt as hollow as the gift bag she'd handed me. I lowered myself onto the bench. It groaned beneath me, and I stared at the empty swing. The Rolex flashed again in my mind, an image I couldn't scrub away. "Warren? That you?" The voice shook me from my thoughts. It was Dean, my neighbor, jogging past with his spaniel trotting at his side. His round face was flushed, warm as ever. I forced a smile and stood. "Didn't expect to see you out here," he said, pulling his dog to a stop. "Figured you'd be celebrating with Marissa today." "Celebration's over," I said, my voice flatter than intended. Dean raised an eyebrow, but I shrugged it off. "Just needed some air." He nodded, ruffling the dog's ears. "Saw your girl downtown last month at that swinky jewelry place on Alder Avenue. Looked like she was buying something fancy." He chuckled, oblivious to the blade he'd just plunged in my gut. "Guess she's got expensive taste, huh?" My throat tightened. "Yeah, I managed." "She does." The world spun slightly. Swing chains blurred. Alder Avenue. Jewelry. The Rolex. The pieces slammed into place. She hadn't been at any doctor's office. She was shopping, spending my money on a luxury gift for Martin. Dean kept chatting about the weather, but I couldn't hear him. Not really. My mind was sprinting ahead, connecting dots I hadn't wanted to see. Eventually, he glanced at the sky and said, "Better beat the rain," then jogged off with a wave. I didn't move. Not right away. The first raindrops tapped against my coat. The swing set looked smaller than I remembered. Everything did. By the time I walked back home, my steps were slower, heavier, but more certain. The anger had cooled into something solid, almost metallic. Marissa had lied. Grant had sneered. And I'd let it all happen. Back inside the kitchen, the socks still lay untouched like a bad joke with no punchline. The Rolex shone behind my eyes. I opened the laptop again. The photo was still up. But this time, my hands were steady, unshaking. I typed, "Alder Avenue Jewelry." The search results loaded. A familiar storefront appeared on the screen. The clock ticked behind me, but the sound no longer mattered. It wasn't time slipping away anymore. It was illusion. The illusion of my daughter. I clicked through to the store's website. A plan forming, sharp-edged and unrelenting. I had to know, was that Rolex real? Was the betrayal really that blatant? The rain started tapping harder against the window, steady and cold, as if mirroring my thoughts. There was no going back now. The rain pounded against my windshield as I pulled into a lot just down from Alder Avenue. The wipers dragged across the glass in tired rhythm. In my jacket pocket was a folded printout of Martin's photo, the watch front and center. Yesterday's shock had fermented overnight. Now it was something else entirely. Something cold. Something focused. The skyline of Granville loomed through the gray drizzle, all steel and glass, cold and unmoved by the storm rising inside me. I stepped out of the car. The air was thick with the scent of wet asphalt and the faint trail of expensive perfume drifting from nearby boutiques. Ahead, the glowing sign of Elise Fine Jewelry stood like a verdict waiting to be read, truth or betrayal behind its polished doors. Inside was another world entirely. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Prisms danced along glass cases. Everything whispered wealth. The air itself seemed curated. A young woman approached, dressed in a tailored blazer, her expression pleasant but rehearsed. "Welcome, sir. Looking for something special today?" Her tone was warm, but I caught the subtle glance she gave my worn jacket and scuffed shoes. I didn't fit here. Neither did Marissa. But that hadn't stopped her from walking these same floors, spending my money. "I need information," I said, pulling the folded printout from my coat pocket. My voice was steady, even as my heart pounded like a drum. "This watch? Was it purchased here?" I laid the page flat on the glass. The image of the Rolex Daytona stared back, sharp and undeniable. Her eyes flickered. Recognition. And my stomach turned. "I'll check with our jeweler," she said, picking up the printout and vanishing behind a velvet curtain. I stood there, swallowed by silence. The only sound was the faint tick of a display clock in the corner. Time again. Always ticking. Always mocking. I thought of Marissa's voicemail from last night, her voice strained. "Dad, please, just talk to me." I hadn't answered. Not yet. An older man appeared, bald and trim, a calm authority about him. He carried the printout carefully. "I'm Mr. Winslow," he said, his tone professional but guarded. "This is a Daytona model, yes. We sold one nearly identical to this back in March." He returned the printout, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied me. May I ask why you're inquiring? My throat tightened, but I met his gaze. It was a gift. I need to confirm where it came from and who paid for it. From my inside coat pocket, I slid a credit card statement across the glass. A $9,400 charge circled in red. My account. Was it used for the purchase? Winslow glanced at the numbers, then tapped on a nearby tablet. After a few seconds, he nodded. Yes, this transaction matches. Paid in full. March 17th. He looked up. A young woman completed the sale. She was accompanied by a man. Said it was for a family member. Each word landed like a weight, confirming everything I feared. Marissa, Grant, my money. My voice came out low, almost a growl. The watch, was it real? Winslow paused only briefly, then gave a firm nod. We don't carry replicas, sir. That piece was $9,800, including tax. Then, a subtle shift in his posture. Is something wrong? I forced a smile, tight and hollow. No, nothing at all. Just needed to know. I took back the printout and folded the statement neatly, like evidence. The light in the store felt harsher now. The air too still, too controlled. I nodded my thanks, turned, and stepped back into the rain. My shoes splashed into puddles like punctuation marks. The truth was mine now, and it was worse than I'd imagined. Back in my car, I sat there, soaked in silence. The crumpled printout trembled in my fist. The rain streaked across the windshield, blurring everything. I saw her face, not the woman who lied, but the little girl who cried when I cleaned the gravel from her scraped knees. 2 months ago. Her voice had been soft, near tears. It's for medical bills, Daddy. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. And I believed her. I wired the money that same day. Felt like a good father. A protector. Now I just felt used. I looked into the rearview mirror. Gray hair. Tired eyes. But a new hardness underneath it all. The man staring back wasn't the same Warren who'd smiled through the pain of cheap socks. He was someone else now. Someone finished being taken for granted. My phone lit up on the passenger seat. Missed calls from Marissa. 20. Each one stacking like silent accusations. She knew. She had to know I'd seen the photo. That I was asking questions. My finger hovered over her name. The screen glowed like a fuse waiting to be lit. The rain pounded harder, drumming the roof of my car, a relentless tempo to match the pulse behind my eyes. I pressed call. It rang, and rang. Then her voice burst through the speaker. Sharp, edged with annoyance. Dad, finally. Why haven't you answered? Her tone was a mess of relief and irritation, as if I was the one who owed her an explanation. I gripped the steering wheel, the leather slick under my palm, and took a long breath. The next moment would change everything. I've been busy, I said, my voice low and deliberate. Had to verify something. Like a $9,800 Rolex? The words hit like cold stones tossed through glass. For a moment, there was only the steady roar of the rain against the car roof. I could almost picture her pacing around her pristine living room, manicured nails tapping against her phone screen, trying to stay calm. What are you talking about? She snapped, but her voice had a tremor now, a small crack in the wall she'd built. You're being ridiculous. Am I? I leaned forward, watching rain streak down the windshield like tears I refused to let fall. I went to the store, Marissa. Alder Avenue. They confirmed it. You used my card for Martin. My voice remained steady, but each word dropped with the weight of the trail. The clock in my mind ticked, loud and unrelenting, counting the seconds of her silence. She laughed, sharp and hollow. God, you always turn everything into some massive drama. It was a gift, okay? Martin's done so much for us. You wouldn't get it. The condescension was like vinegar, but beneath it, I heard it panic. She was scrambling. A gift, I repeated, my voice flat. With my money. You told me it was for medical expenses. Essential, you said. My free hand curled into a fist, nails pressing into skin. What else have you lied about? This isn't your business, she fired back, her voice growing shrill. You don't get to control what I do. I'm not a kid anymore, Daddy. The way she said the word, mocking, dismissive, cut deeper than I expected. I saw her again at 16, begging for a designer dress she swore she'd earn, promising she'd make me proud. I believed her then. Not now. Then act like an adult, I said coldly. Start by explaining yourself. Outside, the rain thickened, a silver curtain sealing me inside the moment. Her breathing came through the phone quick, uneven. She was cornered now. You're so petty, she spat. I don't have time for this. The line went dead. Silence. Heavier than a storm. I stared at the screen. Her final words echoed in my mind. Petty. Ridiculous. Not your business. My chest ached, but it wasn't just pain anymore. It was something heavier. More permanent. Resolve. I stepped out of the car. The rain hit me like cold needles, soaking my jacket and hair, but it cleared my head. I opened the notes app on my phone, fingers wet and trembling, and typed out her words. One by one. Not your business. Petty. Each word, a brick in the foundation of something I was building. The street was quiet. Warm lights glowed from windows of tidy homes. But I felt nothing. Marissa thought she could brush me aside, but she'd misjudged the man I'd become. I leaned against the car, rain pooling around my feet, and heard Ellen's voice, soft, firm, a memory etched into my bones. Don't let anyone walk over you, Warren. I had failed her on that. But not anymore. My phone buzzed in my hand. A new text from an unfamiliar number. Mr. Delaney, I'm Elaine Carter, attorney. Heard you might need some help. Can you meet tomorrow, 9 a.m.? 220N, Valmere Avenue. I stared at the screen, the rain blurring the words. An attorney. A stranger. A lifeline. My thumb hovered over reply. The clock inside my head ticked forward, not toward the past, but toward something else entirely. The next morning, sunlight sliced through the blinds in Elaine Carter's office, casting meat stripes across a desk cluttered with paper stacks and coffee mugs. The air smelled like stale espresso and old books, a dissonant contrast to the sleek skyline of Granville outside the window. I sat across from her, my bank statement laid out like an autopsy report. The weight of last night's call still lingered. You're so petty. But here, in this cramped and chaotic office, something new sparked inside me. Possibility. The wall clock ticked steadily, a slow reminder that time wasn't finished with me yet. Elaine leaned back, her gray blazer rumpled, eyes alert despite the laugh lines that softened her face. So, she said, pen tapping the desk. Your daughter's got a taste for luxury watches and a gift for lying. Sound about right? Her tone was dry, edged with humor that caught me off guard. I managed a tight smile. Pretty much, I said, fingers brushing the edge of the statement. The $9,800 charge glared up at me like an open wound. She used my card, lied to me about why. And then, socks. Elaine snorted. Socks for Father's Day. That's bold. She leaned forward, scanning the papers. But boldness doesn't pay for Rolexes. So let's talk next steps. You want to protect what's yours. Her directness didn't sting. In fact, it steadied me. I shifted in my seat. The chair creaked beneath me. I do, but I don't know where to start. She's my daughter. The words hurt. A quiet confession. I had spent 2 decades building a life around her. After Celeste passed, every decision, every sacrifice was for Marissa. No trips abroad. No hobbies. Just tuition. Her wedding. Her future. And now this. Elaine's expression softened, but her voice stayed firm. You're not the first parent she's burned, Warren. And you won't be the last unless you take action. She slid a folder toward me. Inside was a contract. I can help you. Start by freezing her access to your accounts, Elaine said, her voice calm but firm. Then we dig. See what else she's been up to. Her confidence settled over me like armor, unexpected, but welcome. I reached for the contract, the paper cool against my fingertips. A memory came uninvited. Marissa's wedding. Her radiant smile as I handed her a check for the venue. My dream of a quiet escape to Southern Europe vanished with that gesture, and I told myself it was worth it. That she'd carry our family's love forward. But now all I could see was her hand on my card. Her lies, stacking like debt. I signed. The pen moved steadily across the paper. It felt like more than a signature, it was a vow. Elaine nodded and gathered the documents into a folder. Good. We'll start with your bank. I'll need access to anything she's touched. Every transaction. She paused, her eyes searching mine. You sure about this? It's not just numbers, it's blood. I stood and walked to the office window. Below, Granville stretched in every direction, noisy, relentless. I've given her everything, I said, voice low. Time. Trust. No. I'm taking something back. The words felt strange in my mouth, but they felt right. The wall clock ticked behind me, not with regret, but with purpose. We went over the steps, accounts, authorizations, timelines, legal motions. Elaine's dry humor kept the weight from crushing me. She joked about giving Marissa a crash course in the value of $1. It drew a thin laugh from me, but it wasn't empty. It was something. I left the office lighter, the sun warm on my shoulders as I stepped out onto Valmere Avenue. For the first time in days, I wasn't just reacting. I was moving forward. In my car, I glanced at my phone, habit more than need. A bank alert blinked onto the screen. New attempted transaction, $2,300. Marissa's name flagged it. Another bold reach. One more grab from a well she thought would never run dry. I clenched my jaw. But this time, I wasn't surprised. The ticking in my head grew louder. Whatever she was trying to buy, she was about to learn. My generosity had a limit. The marble floor inside the bank reflected overhead lights like polished ice. The chill soaked through my shoes as I approached the counter. Outside, May sunlight bathed the streets, but in here, the air conditioning hummed sharp and sterile. In my hand was the form, Revoke Secondary Access. Each line was final. Each box a boundary I should have drawn long ago. My pen hovered. For a second, the weight of 20 years returned, her laughter, her scraped knees, her graduation tears, the quiet way I said yes too many times. But the glint of the Rolex. Her words, "You're so petty." They buried everything else. I signed. The scratch of the pen was quiet, but it echoed in my chest like thunder. The branch manager, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, scanned the form. "This takes effect immediately," he said. "The secondary user, Ms. Marissa Delaney, will be notified shortly." He looked up as if expecting hesitation. I met his gaze without blinking. "That's fine." He nodded. I slid the form back to him. My hands didn't shake. But inside, something cracked open, something fierce, like triumph dressed in quiet sorrow. This wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. The kind she'd walked over again and again. I stepped out of the building. The doors whispered shut behind me. Sunlight bounced off windshields and street signs, bright and unapologetic. I blinked against it, climbed into the car, and headed toward a cafe down the block, my next meeting with Elaine. The place buzzed with the hum of midday chatter and clinking cutlery. The scent of roasted beans wrapped around me as I entered. I found Elaine at a corner booth, laptop open, a half-eaten scone resting on a napkin beside her. She looked up, eyebrow raised. "Well, signed and done," I said, sliding into the seat. "She's cut off." The words settled between us. They felt good, solid, like a door shutting behind me for good. Elaine leaned back with a smirk. "Bet she'll love that even more than those socks she gave you." Her humor was sharp, but her eyes were kind. "Your daughter's about to learn what practical really looks like." She tapped at her laptop. "I'm pulling transaction histories now. There may be more to this story than a Rolex." I took a slow sip of coffee. Its bitterness suited my mood. "I want the full picture," I said. Every dollar, every lie. Another memory surfaced. Her hand on my arm at her wedding. "Just for now," she'd said. "It'll help me start strong." I thought it was love. All I see now is entitlement. Above us, the cafe's old clock hung frozen at 11:43. Broken. Motionless. But I wasn't. I was moving again. Reclaiming something. Elaine walked me through the next steps. Financial tracing. Legal strategy. Her clarity steadied me. This wasn't just strategy. It was survival. Reinvention. "You're doing this for you, Warren," she said gently. "Not just to punish her. Don't lose sight of that." I met her gaze. Not just an attorney, a voice of reason, a mirror of my worth when I'd forgotten how to see it myself. Then my phone buzzed, slicing the moment clean. Marissa's name. Another call. Urgent. Furious. I let it ring. The cafe's noise swallowed the sound like it was nothing. Then came the voicemail. I pressed play. Dad, what the hell did you do? My card just got declined. Fix this. No. Her fury was unfiltered. Not confusion. Not remorse. Just outrage. I set the phone down. My coffee cup sat warm between my hands. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel powerless. Elaine raised an eyebrow, but I just offered a thin, unwavering smile. The clock inside my head kept ticking, counting down not to peace, but to her next move and mine. The living room was dim, the last traces of May twilight filtering through the drapes, laying long shadows across the faded carpet. I sat on the same couch where I'd unwrapped those socks just days ago. A moment that had once meant something, now stained by bitterness. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Her name lit up the screen. 17 calls in under an hour. Each one a jab at the boundary I'd finally drawn. The old mantel clock, stopped years ago, stared back at me with unmoving hands. It felt like a mirror, a symbol of where things had halted, a silent partner in my refusal to be manipulated any longer. Family photos still lined the shelves. Marissa at 5, pigtails bouncing. At 16, cap tilted at graduation. Each image from a different life, one where I wasn't the villain. The phone buzzed again. Her name pulsed like a warning light. I let it ring. My fingers moved across the edge of a photo frame. Ellen and Marissa, laughing in a park, frozen in time. The vibration stopped, then started again. Voicemail. I braced myself and pressed play. Her voice cracked through the quiet, sharp, frantic. Dad, what the hell? My card's been declined. Fix this or I swear we're done. Done. As if I had been the one lying. As if I was the one who'd spent nearly $10,000 on a Rolex for Martin while handing her father discount socks. I stood. My legs needed motion. My thoughts didn't. In the kitchen, the air still carried the faint scent of lemon polish, a habit I'd never shaken since Ellen passed. I filled the kettle with trembling hands, but my mind was clear. Steel forged. The phone rang again. This time I answered. My voice cold. Marissa. Stop calling. Stop calling? She snapped. Her disbelief bled through the line. You cut me off, Dad. How am I supposed to live? You're being selfish. That word. Selfish. It landed like a slap, but I didn't flinch. Selfish. I said, my voice low and steady. I gave you college. Paid for your wedding. Believed your lies. And you spent my money, lied, to buy a luxury watch for your husband's father. The kettle hissed behind me, steam rising like smoke from a slow fire. Silence followed, tight and awkward, broken only by her jagged breathing. It's not what you think, she said finally, her tone softer, turning manipulative. Martin's important to us. You just don't get it. Just fix the card, please. That please was practiced. The voice of a child who knew how to use softness as leverage. No, I said, flat and final. You made your choices. Live with them. I hung up. My chest pounded, but my will didn't waver. The phone buzzed once more. Voicemail. I didn't need to hear it, but I played it anyway. Her voice hissed through the speaker. You'll regret this. Grant won't let it slide. Grant. The husband who always stood in her shadow, now a threat? Or just another puppet with a mouth? I set the phone down. The room had gone dark. The shadows felt heavier. I reached out and touched the old brass mantel clock. Its surface cold. Still. A memory bubbled up, Marissa at 10, rushing into my arms after a fight with her friends, tears soaking into my shirt. I had been her safe place. Now I was her adversary. The kettle shrieked behind me loud, piercing, like her voice on the phone. I poured the tea slowly, steam blurring the frame of her smiling photo. She wasn't that girl anymore. And I wasn't the father who forgave without end. The phone buzzed again. Not her this time. A text. From Elaine. Police station. Tomorrow. 8 a.m. Marissa and Grant filed a complaint. I've got your back. A complaint. My stomach turned. The room shrank around me, but I didn't flinch. I stood there, tea untouched, the weight of what was coming pressing into my shoulders. Whatever storm she conjured, I would face it. The station smelled like burnt coffee and photocopier ink. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing with the soft whine of neglect. I sat in a cramped office, the chair stiff beneath me. A manila folder lay open on the metal desk. Officer Daniels, a broad-shouldered man with a skeptical brow, flipped through the pages like a judge reviewing charges. His eyes flicked to me now and then, as if measuring guilt. Elaine sat beside me, her presence calm and composed. Her navy blazer looked sharp under the sickly lights. She didn't speak, but her silence was protective. Outside, Granville's morning dragged on under low-hanging clouds. The sky matched the weight in my chest. Daniels finally cleared his throat. "Mr. Delaney," he began, his tone gruff but not unkind. "Your daughter and son-in-law claim you restricted their access to shared family funds. They say it's caused significant hardship. Care to respond?" His voice implied judgment, and I felt the pen tighten in my grip, the plastic biting into my palm. "Family funds," I said, voice even but firm. "It's my account. They used it, without my consent, to purchase a nearly $10,000 gift for someone else." I blocked the card to stop further misuse. I let the word sit there. Misuse. No. Theft. Daniels paused, eyebrows twitching upward. He scribbled something on a notepad. Elaine leaned forward. Her voice was crisp, steady, in control. "Officer, my client acted within his rights. His daughter, Ms. Delaney, misrepresented the nature of the expenses. She claimed they were for medical reasons, then used his card for unauthorized luxury purchases." She tapped the folder between them. "We have full bank records, transaction details, and confirmation from the retailer who sold the item." She paused. "And we're prepared to file counterclaims should it come to that." Elaine slid the folder across the desk, her movements calm, deliberate. "This isn't abuse," she said evenly. "It's self-defense." Officer Daniels flipped the cover open again, his frown deepening as he scanned the documents. "This says the charge was for a Rolex. You're saying your daughter lied about what the money was for?" His skepticism had shifted. It now leaned toward Marissa's version of the story, and for the first time all morning, I felt a flicker of hope. "Exactly," I said, holding his gaze. "She told me she needed it for medical bills." That was a lie. A memory surfaced, Grant standing in my living room years ago, promising he'd look after Marissa. His smile too smooth, his eyes never quite meeting mine. Now his name was listed beside hers on the complaint, a coward shielding himself behind her venom. Elaine's hand brushed my sleeve, a silent cue to stay composed. "Officer," she said, her tone cool but firm, "this complaint is retaliatory. Mr. Delaney acted entirely within his legal rights. In fact, we're considering pursuing charges of fraud." Her words were sharp as glass. Daniels leaned back slightly, reassessing. "We'll review it," he said, closing the folder with finality. "But I'll need formal statements from both sides. For now, that's all." He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. The room seemed to exhale. So did I. Elaine gathered her documents with the same confidence she'd walked in with. We left the station without a backward glance. Her car was warmer than the sterile air of the precinct, the scent of leather and mint gum drifting in the quiet. Elaine started the engine, her silver wristwatch catching the sunlight, modern and sleek. A sharp contrast to the stopped clock still sitting on my mantel at home. A sign, I thought, of the road ahead. "They're desperate," she said, glancing over at me. "Filing my complaint? That's a weak play. They're on the ropes." I nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the gray streets of Granville blurring past. Grant's name being on it, I murmured, I didn't expect him to get involved. The betrayal sat bitter in my chest. He'd always followed her lead, a quiet shadow in every room. But now he was all in, a co-conspirator. "He's scared," Elaine said, a smirk at the corner of her mouth. "They both are. But we're not done yet." She paused. Have you ever thought about your will, Warren? Might be time to reallocate some things. Her voice was soft, but the suggestion landed like stone, measured and heavy. I pulled out the notebook I'd started keeping. Its pages were already filled with notes, dates, lies. I flipped to a new page and wrote a single word, will. The pen felt heavier than it should have, like every stroke carried the weight of a future I'd once promised to someone who'd squandered it. Outside, the city moved past, faceless and fast. Elaine's watch ticked faintly beside me. Time was still moving. But now it was mine again. The notary's office was quiet, removed from the city's midday pace. The scent of aged paper and wax polish hung in the air. A heavy oak table stood between me and the life I'd once planned, and the one I was rewriting now. Elaine stood nearby, reading over clauses with sharp focus. Her calm presence steadied me. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, warming the room, but my hands were cold around the pen. Rewriting my will felt like cutting something open with a dull knife. But it was also the only way to stitch myself back together. The notary, a soft-spoken woman with silver hair and reading glasses, looked up from the final page. "Mr. Delaney, this new will designates your estate to a managed trust," she said, "with Ms. Carter as executor. No named beneficiaries. Is that correct?" Her voice was gentle, but the question pressed like a seal. I nodded. "That's correct," I said quietly, my voice even despite the knot in my chest. The words didn't just mark the end of a legal document. They marked the end of promises I made after Celeste died. To protect Marissa. To give her everything. But she had shattered that legacy herself. Elaine caught my eye. Her smile was small, knowing. "You're doing the right thing, Warren," she said. "This cuts them off, clean. No loopholes. No second chances." She gave a half smile. "And let's be honest, I'm a hell of a good executor." I chuckled, short but real. The tension broke like a brittle shell. I signed the first page. The pen scratched across the surface like a blade. A memory surfaced uninvited, writing the original will after Celeste's funeral. Marissa had only been 12, still clinging to me at night. I'd stayed up planning her future, college, a home, stability, everything I could offer. Now I was removing her name one signature at a time. The notary pressed her seal onto the final page, her movements practiced and final. "All done," she said, placing the documents into a folder. "Copies will be submitted before close of business." I nodded my thanks. My voice came from somewhere far away. We stepped out into the Granville spring air. The city buzzed with life again, vibrant and loud. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I belonged to it. We walked through a nearby park. The grass was impossibly green, children shouting at a nearby playground. I sat on a bench, Elaine beside me. Her silence wasn't heavy, it was comforting. A bird took off from a branch nearby, wings cutting across the open sky. I watched it soar and thought, that's what this is. Hard one, but real. "This changes everything," I said quietly. "She's really gone now." Elaine didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on the kids playing in the sun. "Not gone," she said. "Just not your burden anymore." I let her words sink in. They weren't cruel. They were truth. I thought of Marissa's voicemails, her shrieking, her threats, and felt nothing but clarity. No regret. Only resolve. "There's more we can do," Elaine said, her tone shifting to something quieter, more calculating. "Martin, for instance. I've got ideas, but we'll need to tread carefully." She didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. I trusted her instincts. The clock tower at the edge of the park struck noon, its chime crisp and clear, a reminder that time was no longer my enemy. It was mine again, ticking forward. My phone buzzed, slicing through the moment. Martin De La Rosa. A call, not a text. The voicemail came seconds later. "Warren, we need to talk," he said, his voice low, urgent. "Meet me at my office tomorrow, 10 sharp." I stared at the screen. The bird I'd watched earlier now a dot on the distant horizon. What did Marissa's father-in-law want with me now? The ticking in my mind grew louder, a countdown to something I hadn't anticipated. Sunset cast a warm glow across Granville's skyline, painting it in streaks of amber and rose. It softened nothing, especially not the cold grandeur of Martin's estate. The gates parted soundlessly, and I stepped through the massive oak doors, the polished marble foyer gleaming beneath a crystal chandelier. Each beam of light cut sharp angles across the room, like the truths I carried in my chest. In my jacket pocket, a folded note from Elaine. Martin knows. Be ready. My heart beat slow but heavy, not with fear, but with a quiet sense of justice inching closer. The scent of polished wood and imported leather clung to the air, opulence in every corner. It didn't intimidate me. I stood tall. The ticking in my mind was steady now, not counting down to confrontation, but to clarity. Martin stood in the study, his large frame stiff behind a mahogany desk. His normally composed face was hardened with something colder than anger. His fingers clutched a velvet box like a grenade that hadn't gone off. Elaine was already there, standing just behind him. Her blazer crisp, her presence calm and unshakable. "Warren," Martin said, his voice hoarse and low, "I owe you an apology." He slid the box across the desk. No explanation. He didn't need one. The Rolex gleamed inside, the same one Marissa had purchased with my $9,800. The symbol of every betrayal layered beneath her smile. I didn't touch it. My hands stayed at my sides, steady. "You didn't know," I said, my tone quiet but firm. She lied to both of us. It was a simple sentence, but it carried decades. Tuition. Sacrifice. Years spent building a future she traded for glitter and deception. Martin's jaw clenched. He opened the box again. The Rolex glinted under the overhead light, shameless and precise. "She told me it was her gift to me," he said, his voice breaking under the weight. "Said it was to thank me for supporting their family. I'd never have accepted it if I'd known where it came from." His honesty carved through the room's pretentiousness, and for the first time, I saw not a towering businessman, but a man blindsided by someone he trusted. Elaine stepped forward. Her voice was cool and exact. "Marissa misrepresented the funds. We have bank records, her signed authorization, and testimony from the jeweler. It was Warren's money. No consent was given. Each word she spoke was surgical. Truth laid bare." She glanced at me briefly, a small, silent reminder. "Don't look away now." Martin slammed the box shut. The sound was sharp. Final. "She's been cozying up to my company, too," he said darkly, dropping hints about wanting a role, pressing me on investment opportunities. He shook his head, disgust curling his lip. "I thought it was ambition, but it's not. It's greed." His words filled the space. Heavy, unfinished. There was more, but he wasn't ready to say it. I didn't press. I met his eyes. "I don't want your pity, Martin. I want what's right." The words weren't just for him. They were for me, for Celeste, for every quiet sacrifice that led here. Martin nodded, pushing the box across the desk. "Take it," he said. "It's yours, and I'll deal with Marissa." His voice was iron, and I believed him. I picked up the box, not for the watch. For what it represented, dignity returned. Elaine and I left the study in silence. Her hand brushed my arm gently as we stepped outside. The evening air was cool and quiet. The city's hum faint in the distance. In the car, I opened the box again. The Rolex glinted in the dim light. A memory flickered, Martin at a family dinner, toasting Marissa with pride, calling her the heart of both families. That pride now shattered, its sharp edges pointing inward. I closed the box. It wasn't just a timepiece. It was proof. I wasn't the fool she thought. My phone buzzed. One missed call. "Marissa." Then a text, "We need to talk." On the screen, her words hovered like bait. A plea or a trap? I set the phone down, the box resting in my lap. I started the engine. The clock in my mind kept ticking. Toward her next move. Toward mine. The morning sun lit up the porch of my suburban home, catching on beads of dew nestled in the petals of the athras lining the walkway. The wind stirred the branches gently, a moment of calm before whatever came next. I stood at the door, my hand on the knob. The creak of floorboards behind me, familiar and grounding. Her text had lingered in my mind overnight. "We need to talk." I hadn't replied. I hadn't expected her to show up. But there she was. Marissa stood at the edge of the porch, her auburn hair loose around her face, her eyes rimmed red, her expression unraveling. The polish had cracked. The performance was slipping. Grant stood beside her, slouched, eyes locked on the pavement, his hands jammed into his pockets like he wanted to disappear. They looked smaller now, dimmer, not pitiable, just real. Their smugness was gone, and with it, their power. I opened the door, but didn't step out, didn't invite them in. I stood there, calm, solid. The clock inside me ticked once more. Steady, marking the end of their hold. My arms crossed. What do you want? My voice was calm, firm. A far cry from the man who once softened at the first sign of Marissa's tears. The porch smelled of fresh earth. The flowers lining the walkway were a quiet reminder of the life I'd built, one that didn't need her lies to survive. Marissa's lips trembled. Her voice cracked. Dad, please. We're sorry. We messed up. She clutched her handbag tighter, her manicured nails digging into the leather. A nervous habit I hadn't seen since her teenage years. The watch, the money, it was a mistake. Let us make it right. Her eyes searched mine, pleading. But beneath the desperation, I saw it, the calculation, the hope that I'd cave, that I'd still play the fool. Grant cleared his throat beside her, his voice flat and thin. Yeah, Warren, we didn't mean to hurt you. It just got out of hand. He looked to Marissa like he always did, waiting for her to lead. No backbone, no conviction, just the same shadow he'd always been. I remembered their wedding day, him swearing he'd stand by her. Empty words. I stepped forward, the porch groaning beneath my weight, and leaned on the railing. A mistake, I said, my tone level but sharp. You spent $9,800 of my money on a watch for Martin. Lied to my face about needing it for medical bills. Then filed a police complaint when I cut you off. I let the silence breathe, each word a stone in the wall between us. Marissa's tears finally spilled, but they moved nothing in me. We've lost everything, she whispered, voice cracking. Martin's furious. He cut us off. Please, Dad, we need you. The admission was telling. Maybe her schemes with Martin's company had collapsed. Maybe she'd aimed too high and lost her grip. She didn't say, and I didn't care. You made your choices, I said, standing tall. Live with them. The words echoed what I'd told her before, but now they felt like truth carved in stone. A memory flickered, Marissa at 7, pressing a hand-drawn card into my palms, her smile unfiltered and pure. That little girl was gone. In her place stood a stranger begging for forgiveness I no longer owed. Grant shifted, his voice barely audible. We'll do anything, Warren. Just name it. His desperation wasn't touching, it was weak. And it only made me firmer. I shook my head and turned back toward the door. There's nothing left to say. The hinges groaned as I opened it, the sound like a closing argument. A barrier rising. Marissa's sob echoed behind me, but I didn't look back. Inside, the living room waited, still and quiet. The mantel clock stared back, frozen as always, a witness to the choice I'd finally made. I closed the door behind me. The latch clicked shut. Final. My phone lit up on the coffee table. Elaine's name. I answered. Her voice was bright. Warren. Got time for a walk? Park at noon. We need to talk about the final step. Her words were calm, but laced with promise. A step toward something new. I glanced at the door. The porch was empty now. The clock inside my head ticked again, not backward, not in grief. Forward. The park pulsed with late May energy. The Granville air was sweet with lilac and freshly cut grass. Gravel crunched beneath our steps as a lane, and I walked the tree-lined path, the sun warm across my face. In my jacket pocket was a check, $9, $800, minus the jeweler's fee. I'd sold the Rolex, turned the symbol of betrayal into something that mattered. And already, I'd decided to give it away. The stone that had sat in my chest since the day Marissa handed me those socks was gone, replaced with quiet, clarity. Children shouted from the swings nearby, their laughter ringing through the trees. That sound, it didn't just belong to them. I could feel it too. A new beginning. Hard one, but mine. Elaine bumped her shoulder gently against mine, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "You know, with that money, you could have bought a small yacht," she said. "Or at least a halfway decent watch for yourself." Her voice was playful, but behind the teasing was pride. She'd walked with me through every storm: banks, lawyers, police reports, the will. And now here. Her friendship was a gift I hadn't seen coming. I chuckled, the sound unforced. "I chose peace instead," I said, patting the folded check in my pocket. "Dropped it off this morning. Youth shelter downtown. They'll do more with it than I ever could." It had felt easy, natural, the right thing to do. Turn her greed into someone else's hope. Elaine nodded, her smile softening. "Damn good choice," she said, nudging a pebble off the path with her boot. "Though, I'm holding out for a coffee date the next time you're feeling generous." Her wink caught me off guard. I laughed, and this time it stuck. There was warmth there, a flicker of something neither of us named. We reached the edge of the lake. Its surface shimmered under the midday sun. I crouched, picked up a flat stone, and sent it skimming across the water. It bounced once, twice, then vanished, leaving widening ripples behind. A memory stirred. Walking here with Celeste, her fingers wrapped around mine. We'd talked about facing the world together. And we had, until the world changed. I'd lost her, then lost Marissa. But I was finding someone else now. Myself. The ripples faded, but their pattern lingered, just like the choices I'd made. Earlier that morning, I'd walked into the shelter's modest office. Cracked paint, cluttered desk, a warmth that wasn't bought. The director, a woman with kind eyes and a tired smile, had taken the check with both hands. Her voice trembled with gratitude. "This will change lives, Mr. Delaney." I could only nod, my throat too tight to answer. The Rolex, once a monument to betrayal, was now a bridge, a way forward. Elaine slowed near a bench overlooking the water. Her gaze lingered on the lake, her silhouette backlit by the sun. "You've come a long way, you know," Elaine said softly, her voice carried by the breeze. "From socks to this. Not bad for a guy who thought he'd lost everything." Her words landed gently, but firmly, reminders of the man I'd been and the one I was becoming. I sat beside her. The bench was warm from the sun. For a long moment, I watched the light ripple across the lake's surface, still carrying the echoes of the stone I'd tossed minutes before. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said, meeting her gaze. "You gave me a reason to fight back." The words weren't grand, but they were true. She had seen my worth when I couldn't. The wind stirred again, rustling the trees. The sun of spring wrapped around us, fresh-cut grass, blooming lilacs, the warmth of renewal. And in that moment, I felt Celeste beside me. Her presence not as memory, but as quiet approval, a whisper of peace. Elaine smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Stick with me, Warren," she said, her tone light but certain. "I've got something new in the works, community fund. Could use a guy with a heart like yours." Her offer wasn't detailed. It didn't need to be. It was a door left slightly ajar, a future not yet written. And for the first time in years, I was ready to walk through it. I picked up another stone and flicked it into the lake. The ripples spread wide and sure, touching the surface in perfect rings. The park hummed around us, birds overhead, children in the distance, wind in the branches. And I was part of it, fully. No longer weighed down by Marissa's manipulation. No longer trapped in the echo of my own guilt. Elaine stood and reached out a hand. I took it. Her grip was warm, grounding. We walked on together, her laughter caught in the breeze, mingling with the spring air. It felt like something new was beginning, not a second chance, but a first real one. The clock inside me ticked softly now, not counting down, not chasing ghosts, but moving forward, a rhythm of hope, a life no longer stolen but earned. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. Subscribe to keep this conversation going.